Hi. Come here. Hey. The dog is in here. You saw his tail and now he left. No respect these days. Okay, so for some reason a lot of people are coming out with Vegapunk videos right now, and I'm not sure why. Oh yeah, that's right. So, you know, last week we got everything about this, a whole bunch of stuff about the Seraphim, and now we have something very interesting about Vegapunk, at least appears to be happening. We'll see how that pans out. But this video is going to be me just talking about Vegapunk and maybe some of my ideas of what's happening in regards to that. I wanted to pull out a pair of steampunk goggles, but I don't have a pair of steampunk goggles, unfortunately, and it is much too warm for me to try to put on a jacket to wear for the full video because it's too warm, just in general. Oh well, maybe a different video. I still have to do the rest of those Animanda Attack on Titan ones, but I'm waiting for the series to finish up, for the anime to finish up, so... But moving on to something else that involves very, very strange science. And if you're wondering, the shirt back here says science is magic that works. And if you're wondering why there's a TARDIS and a mini 13th Doctor here, you'll find out later. Or if you saw the thumbnail, you'll probably figure out why I have that there. So, as has been pointed out quite a few times already in the last several days, I actually tried to be very careful not to watch anyone's specific theories about Vegapunk themselves right now, about like any additional things in regards to came out. I watched a couple of chapter reviews, but that's a little bit of a different story. I've tried to not watch any videos that are specifically about like what they think is going on with this new thing that's appeared for Vegapunk, this new bit of information we seem to have gained in the last couple of days. So we'll see how that goes. So if this happens to sound like someone else's, I apologize. I didn't watch any other ones, but there's always a possibility it'll sound like someone else's. Oh well, moving on. So, and also I have a Dr. Stone shirt on because I really did like that anime, and I read the manga, and I'm very excited for whenever the anime comes back. Also, I think Senku and Vegapunk would get along very well. But into the actual portion, the actual main part of the video. If you want my wacky theories, wait till the end. So. Of course, as we've kind of learned about Vegapunk over the years in regards to things that we've heard since Thriller Bark, and, you know, through bits in Sab Odie, and then through other things that we've seen, particularly through Punk Hazard and other various bits where we've learned a fair amount of, learned bits about Vegapunk, you know, where Frankie ended up, and I'll talk about that, while they were all split apart. So, what we know about Vegapunk, at the very least, is that he is the leading scientific, you know, the leading scientist for the world government, for the Marines, for, you know, the Tenryubito, the Celestial Dragons, however way you want to put it. He is their leading scientist. Usually they tend to refer to him as Old Man Vegapunk, so I'm assuming that he is actually a man. I'll get into what I think of the stuff in the most recent chapter. A little bit, but from what we know, he's learned different secrets about Sea Stone and Devil Fruits and Lineage Factor and all this other stuff, and he's helped the Marines and the world government in expanding their control technically over the world, because he's put the Sea Stone on the bottom of the ship so that way they can, you know, sail through the combat and not be nearly as pestered by all the Sea Kings. He's developed different things with the, you know, with Devil Fruits and stuff like that, with his research with that. Seems to be particularly focused on Zoan Devil Fruits, which may tie back to something. And then, of course, he has the Lineage Factor, which, of course, probably also ties into the Devil Fruit stuff in regards to things that he's been researching and everything like that. Other bits that we know that he was started off on Karakuri Island, or the future land of Baltimore, depending on which way you want to put it, which is this very snowy island. I believe it's in Paradise, if I remember correctly. If not, I apologize if I got that location wrong. I don't have all of the geography memorized for One Piece. That's where Teching 101 comes in. But you know, we see, which is weird because I did like a whole section of a video about like Frankie being reunited with the people from Karakuri, so sorry about that. But what we see, I have to fix my camera here, hold on. There we go, that works. But what we've, you know, kind of what we learned is that, you know, when he lived on Karakuri, he ended up developing, you know, he wanted to develop this heating implement that was part of the island that was designed to help warm up the island to make it more habitable and make life easier for the people of Karakuri Island. And then he also ended up turning so many of the animals on the island into cyborgs. And to the point where they're just so, they're there. People have them as pets. They live in the, you know, in the woods. They're just there. They can probably be tamed because they may probably still have like some portion of like their animal brain there. They just happen to also have, I don't know, laser vision and rocket launchers, depending on how that worked out. And, you know, the people of that island, you know, they know about his, you know, they know kind of about Vegapunk. They know that he was a scientist that lived on the island. He wanted to build this giant, you know, heating implement and everything, and he wanted to help them. And then, you know, either he left and from there went into starting Mads, where we know that Queen and Judge and Caesar Clown were a part of that. And that whole thing that happened there. But we don't know exactly when all of that happened. Did he like leave Karakuri Island and then go and start developing Mads and find Queen and Judge, I should say King, not King, find Queen and Judge, and Caesar Clown just somehow found his way there because he's a clown. And, you know, so do we see that? Was that what happened? And then eventually it was like the Mads was broken up by the world government, and, you know, Queen went his way, and Caesar, you know, Judge went off and did his cloning and everything that he wanted to do for the Germa. And then we have, then we have everything that happens with, you know, Caesar Clown or Vegapunk. And Caesar Clown seemed to have stayed near Vegapunk because he was like Vegapunk's assistant for a while, particularly on Punk Hazard, which is like then where they set up Vegapunk's lab. And so we get glimpses of different things in regards to Vegapunk. And it's just like, okay, so somewhat different, interesting ideas there. Vegapunk has, you know, been shown to be like an expert in a lot of different things in regards to, just all these different fields of interest that he has, you know, these scientific achievements in. Sorry, I sneezed. Allergies. When it comes to the sea stone stuff, we know that he has this expertise in geology because, you know, everything that he's developed with the sea stone, with the coating on the ships. There's mentions of like, you know, sea stone bullets, which is just like, a little bit one way or the other, could be real, could be not, depends on what Oda wants to do with the story. There's the sea stone cuffs, although we don't know exactly if like the world government probably had like sea stone handcuffs before Vegapunk came along. Otherwise they would have had a very hard time dealing with devil fruit users for like the past 800 years. So I'm pretty sure that they've had the sea stone cuffs. We know that like the largest repository of sea stone is on Wano, but like I think they found like caches of it in other places around the world, and then those probably took priority with like the world government coming in and go, nope, this sea stone is ours now, we're going to use it for ourselves. Was probably what happened. And so we see some of that, and I was trying to think of other things that we've seen like with geology that like Vegapunk may have contributed to, but I'm not like sure. I know in like the One Piece films that they have like the Dynast stones or whatever they're called that can like blow up half the world, which just sounds like a horrible idea. But I don't think those aren't canon, so I'm not going to talk about those very much. So and there's other things that probably he researched when it came to like geology and stuff like that. And then, of course, we have his meteorology stuff. He wanted to mess around with the climate of Baltimore so that he can make it more habitable for the people. So there's all of that we see happen. That probably also means that he probably maybe messed around with some of the climate on Punk Hazard, but not nearly as what happened when, Aokiji and, Kuzan and, Aokiji and, Sakazuki, or Kuzan and Sakazuki, whichever way you want to put it, when they had their giant battle there and turned the island into a Pokeball. There's that, but we don't know exactly if Vegapunk had done anything with the weather on the island before then, or if there were any other islands he tried to mess with the weather beforehand. Maybe he knows about the Wizards of Witheria, and maybe he's ended up working with them at some point in time. I don't know. They seem like there would be an interesting, camaraderie between them. And then we know that he has a great love for biology, which is where stuff with lineage factor comes into play, with everything that we've seen with that. I'm assuming that's something that has to do with like the seraphims, is like a combination of, the lineage factor and, his weaponry designs and stuff like that coming together. But with the biology, of course, there's a lineage factor. We know that he's made the artificial dragons that were on Punk Hazard. We know that he messed around with like gigantification experiments, which had resulted in probably a fair number of the numbers from Wano. In regards to those, depending on how long each of them has specifically been in the form that they are in now, for the most part, before they were sold to Kaido, and such. So there's those. And then, we know that right now Vegapunk is working on trying to like fix all of the children that had been on Punk Hazard and had been experimented on by Caesar, working on getting them, shrunk down back to their correct size, so that way they, won't die and can go back to their families, I hope. As much as I like Tashigi taking care of them, I'm hoping that like the kids get to like go back to their families, because their families are probably very worried about them. Because Virgo lied to them. So we'll see what happens with that. But Tashigi will probably still stay around there for a little while, but different thing. And then we know that he has a great interest in botany in regards to the devil fruit research that he's done, because we know throughout the time that like Frankie is on Punk Hazard, where he's roaming around Vegapunk's old lab that has been abandoned for a very long time, and yet still has a self-destruct button that Frankie blows up. Pirate. Okay, Frankie, just because there's a skull and crossbones on it does not mean that you need to touch it. It's not a flag. It's a bomb. And so we kind of saw some of that, but we also saw all these notes all over the place, and then we know that even after Frankie blew up the Vegapunk's lab, there was more notes like in the under lab, or whatever it was, the secondary lab. So we know that there was more information down there. And given the fact that Vegapunk basically left this stuff lying around, even if it did involve like devil fruit research, weaponry research, stuff that may have been prototypes for like, because it's like, we know that his other thing was like weaponry, because we know there were high-tech weapons, and then those got transformed into the cyborgs, and the cyborgs got turned into the pacifistas with everything that happened with Kuma, and then the pacifistas have now basically, well, not evolved, but have been developed into what are now the seraphim. So we've seen that. I talked about the Seraphims more last week. Thank you to the, at this point in time, the 8 people that had watched that video. So I thank you for that. But, so there's those. And, like, so we've seen the evolution kind of, like, progressively seen, like, where he started and, like, where he's ended up at the moment. In regards to things that he's invented over the years. We know that with messing around with the devil fruits and lineage factor and everything with what he was, getting from Kaido, that probably a lot of that got put into, we know that definitely got put into the fake devil fruit, the artificial devil fruit that he made that ended up, Momo ended up eating and everything, and Momonosuke ate, and then we know that same research was applied to make the smiles, even though Vegapunk himself was not the one to do that. That was Caesar Clan, but that was using the Vegapunk's research. But yeah, Vegapunk just like left his lab. Like, I don't know if it was like he just up one day and was just like, oh well, you know, I'm tired of trying to make this heating implement. It's not working. I'm gonna go leave. It's just like left Karakuri Island and went to, I don't know, somewhere, and ended up finding like Queen and Judge and everything. Found them, whatever Queen's real name is. Found them and developed Mads. And then, like, the people on Karakuri Island were just like, oh, I wonder what happened to Vegapunk. Well, at least our island looks interesting now. More than just covered in snow. But like, people on the island know about him, and they don't seem to have any type of hatred for him or anything like that. It was just like, oh, he tried to make the island warmer. It didn't work, and now he works for the world government. So I'm assuming what they probably have been told, because like maybe Vegapunk went like back to the research lab at some point in time and like gathered up any information that he wanted to hold on to, maybe. And then, or maybe Mads was based out of there at the time. Maybe Mads was based out of the lab on Karakuri Island. And so, like, the people of the island didn't necessarily know about Judge and Queen and everything like that. Or maybe they were using, like, assumed names at the time or something like that. Queen had a different fake name. Judge was, I don't know, Mr. King to go with, you know, Sanji's Mr. Prince. Yeah. I don't see Judge being able to pull off being as suave as Sanji has been. When he was pretending to be Mr. Prince. But so we see some of that stuff, but like maybe he started out on Karakuri Island, maybe he found Judge and, you know, Queen, and like maybe they came there and maybe they worked there, and then like after everything happened with like the world government coming in and stopping them, then he went off and, you know, that's when he went to go work for the world government, and he didn't want to tell the people on the island exactly everything else that was going on. But it also just looks like he up and left one day. Because, like, there's nothing in there that implies that he's been there for a long time, but it is guarded by the Marines. So, you know, because they don't want other people getting to where Vegapunk's research is. So, yeah. So we've seen a bunch of those things that he seems to be very interested in and working with. And then, so many people have come up with, like, different theories as to, like, what's going on with what happened in the most recent chapter. So in the most recent chapter, we, of course, got introduced to giant robotic shark, and then giant island that is called Egghead Island, that seems to be where Vegapunk's new, you know, base of operations was, because at some point in the past it was on Karakuri Island, and then at some point up until around 2 years ago when the giant battle happened between, you know, the two admirals, it was on, you know, Punk Hazard, and then they evacuated everyone from Punk Hazard, or so they thought, and then like Caesar had been there and like done stuff and then came back. With everything that happened with that, and then Vegapunk, you know, got moved to like Egghead Island. Maybe he'd already been in development of making that island in the first place. Also, the fact that it's not very far from Wano probably implies that they were getting a supply of the sea stone from Wano, and like they were just taking it directly to Vegapunk for him to mess with. Maybe. Seeing if Vegapunk would be able to help all the people that got turned into Smiles. Maybe not the ones that actually got like the animal morphing, but like Otoko and stuff like that, like the rest of the people that had like eaten the Smiles and they were failed Smiles. Maybe something more that way. He might be able to help them or something like that. That would be a nice thing to have happen. Maybe a epilogue type of a thing might happen with that, depending on what else we learn about Vegapunk. But what we also see is when it comes to what we saw in this new chapter, you know, we saw the giant robotic shark, and then we saw like he's helping with, you know, getting the kids back down to their real size. We know that, of course, this is where probably the Seraphim are based out of, and all those types of things. And the other thing that we ended, of course, the big reveal at the end of the chapter is we get this, you know, we get the giant robot showing up that looks like a more giant version of Frankie. You know, that, you know, giant, you know, Frankie's Iron Shogun, you know, the Iron Frankie Shogun looks even like a larger version of that. Pretty sure Vegapunk probably got his hands on some of the Wapol metal too, because Frankie really liked using the Wapol metal to build the Frankie Shogun. So maybe there's probably a possibility that Vegapunk like heard about the Wapol metal, and maybe like that's one of the suppliers that like he gets his metal from is from Wapol. Although maybe he's gonna find a way to like be able to like, I don't know, make it better. I don't know. Walpole's an idiot, and I want any reason to be able to take money away from the man. But what we, kind of what we end up getting at the end of the chapter is, the giant robot opens after it's, holding the Sunny. It'd be like, oh, it's like, and we hear like the voice talking like an old man, because Vegapunk is always referred to as an old man, and the thing opens up and, someone takes off their helmet. And it's a rather busty girl in a tight bodysuit and a very nice jacket, from what I can tell, a helmet, and either an antenna or like a headset. And she comes out and she says, I'm Dr. Vegapunk. And there's a whole thing of like, and then of course we get a break for 2 weeks. So it's just like, well, time for theories. And this is where some of my theories come into play. So the general theories that seem to be going around in regards to this is that she is Vegapunk's daughter, or his wife, or granddaughter, or something along those lines. So I wanted to point out a few bits here. So in regards to the wife theory, which is not a bad theory, she could very well be Vegapunk's wife. He just married someone that's a lot younger than him, or possibly along the lines of maybe she's actually a lot older than she looks, because we know that like Shocky aged extremely well. And we know that Dr. Kureha is like 140 some years old, and she still looks physically very good for her age and everything. And so, and maybe because like this woman might be, married to Dr. Vegapunk, there's the possibility that she maybe she she wants to keep some form of a youthful appearance, and with her father, or with her husband knowing a lot about lineage factors, she would just be able to like make herself look younger. The appearance of like a summer and winter relationship, where it's, the summer is a much younger person and the older person is a winter person. That type of a relationship. I did want to point out one of the most famous couples in regards to married scientists was Madame Marie Curie and her husband Pierre Curie, and they of course did lots of amounts of research on different types of radiation and different things along those lines. They won several Nobel Prizes together, and with some other people being part of their research as well. So there's a possibility that maybe Oda might be like, well, I've talked about Dr. Vegapunk so much, and it might just very well be there is still like the old man Vegapunk, and this girl that we've just introduced to could be his wife, as was stated. And maybe it's like a Madame Curie and Pierre Curie set, where they're both extremely brilliant scientists, with like, Vegapunk is supposed to be like 500 years, ahead in technology and everything like that. And that's why the world government wanted him. And it could just be that like, his wife may not, nothing against Madame Curie, because she was brilliant, but it may be in this case that like his wife may have been someone that could like started off as an assistant, the way that like, Caesar Clown was. And then maybe it ended up being that he ended up actually falling in love with her, and like falling in love with her with her mind. And therefore they are, they got married. The other one is of course the concept of, oh, she's his daughter or granddaughter, which of course is another statement of like a very similar thing, where it's like either she is his daughter, and like he had been married at one point and like they had the child, and now this is his daughter. And because she was raised around her father or grandfather, in those cases, the father-daughter, the daughter-granddaughter thing still kind of applies to the same concept of like either the reason she talks this way is because she was raised by him. And that's just like the speech pattern she's used to hearing so often, because like we know that Kaku like talks like an old man at times too. We saw that throughout the Water 7 arc, which was just funny. But the way that we see it with this, it might just be she talks that way because she's so used to hearing her father or grandfather talk that way. An example of this I did want to point out, because like it kind of popped into my head, was in Star Trek The Next Generation, there is, of course, Data, excuse me. Sorry, Brent Spiner, I love you. Is Data, and at one point there is an episode where he actually built his own daughter. Well, he built his own child, and she chooses to take on the appearance of a female. That's what she chose. And her name is, I think, Lal. L-A-L. Lal. I'm sorry. It's been a long time since I've seen that episode. Admittedly, in that case, in regards to Data, she is a robotic daughter. She is an android the same way that he is. But throughout the course of the one episode that she's there, she ends up actually, her computing power is like 60 trillion calculations per second. She can use her capabilities actually end up exceeding datas in several ways. She can feel emotions. She can understand fear. She can actually do verbal contractions. So like Data is not able to say can't. He can say cannot or do not or will not or would not, but he can't do the won't or can't or shouldn't or, whatever the contraction is. He can't do that. He can just do like the two words separately. And she is actually able to do that. And she is also able to feel love. That does kind of go into the whole thing of like, if this girl that we just got introduced to, this female Vegapunk, Punk 2, as like is what's written on her jumpsuit, what we see she might be like his daughter or granddaughter, or she might be a robot that he made, because there's like that whole theory going around too, that she is a robot that he developed, and that, because he's made the Seraphim and everything like that, maybe she was this like initial test project. And we've seen that Judge has been, of course, able to make the clones. And if Judge, who is probably not nearly as smart of a scientist as Vegapunk is, was able to make the clones with what he understood of the lineage factor, and even able to manipulate Sanji and his brothers and then Reiju's DNA with his own ability, Vegapunk would probably be able to far exceed that in regards to what he would be able to do. So him being able to, develop a child, him making a child, I'm going to Mayuri Kurasushi territory here from Bleach, sorry, but going into that concept where like he makes a child, so maybe she's Vegapunk's version of Nemu, although she does seem to be quite a bit more upbeat than Nemu. I actually really like Nemu in Bleach. She's great. I am sad about what happens with her in the last arc. Not that anyone that hasn't seen Bleach, that this has not aired or anything like that yet in regards to the most recent arc, but whatever. Yeah, I'm getting into Mayuri Kurasuchi territory with that, where it's just like, oh, I'm going to like use my own DNA to make a child. And maybe it was a very similar thing that happened. Maybe she ended up being something very similar to the, all the clone soldiers that like Judge made, or, the way that Sanji and his siblings were made. And it may have gone into that area, or it may have ended up being that like she ended up being like a similar prototype to like the Seraphim. And like maybe she was like an original one. He's like, I actually have like a lot of connection to this one, so I'm actually going to keep it and raise it as my own child. Maybe. Because we know that Judge has been doing like the cloning and everything like that for quite a while now. So Vegapunk is probably leaps and bounds smarter than Judge. Hopefully he's a better father too, if this ends up being the case. Hopefully he's a better father than Mayuri Kurasuchi as well. But this kind of also goes into like, I also wanted to add on sister as a possibility, that she's like Vegapunk's sister. That I just wanted to throw that in there. It's a possibility. I doubt it, but then she would have to be like an old woman maybe, unless there's like a huge age gap between the two of them. The other one is clone, that she's, that goes into the Nemu territory as well, that she is this clone that was made of him, that he made female instead, and is like raising as his child, which goes into the same idea. Or that she's a robot that was actually Vegapunk, and he like put his mind into her body, is like the other side of that one. I'm getting closer and closer into my crazy theories, and now I have two more crazy theories that I did want to add on here. Video ended up being a little longer than I wanted it to be, but I don't care. I still wanted to add these on. So the other thought that I have, which since we're partway through September and almost into October at this point in time, is kind of a Halloween-ish type theory that I had. What if she's a Frankenstein type of Frankenstein setup, like a Frankenstein's monster thing? So, which I guess in this case that would make Vegapunk Dr. Frankenstein, and then she would technically be the monster in this case. But we've already had instances of that being a case in One Piece, with the fact of like Vegapunk turned Kuma into a pacifista, and then he made all the other pacifistas. And then we've seen the Seraphim, and we've seen the cyborgs that he's made. So him being able to, possibly, maybe what it ended up happening, maybe like one of his whole goals was maybe it's a Dr. Freeze territory type of a thing. Well, Dr. Freeze from Batman, I think. Yeah, he's Dr. Freeze. Yeah. Where like generally with Dr. Freeze, there's generally like either his wife or his daughter had like a sickness and he had to freeze her in order so he could try to find a cure for her. Maybe this is a similar territory where like maybe his daughter or his sister could go down the sister route, or his wife or his granddaughter or something along those lines, depending on how old Vegapunk actually is. Maybe what it was she got sick at one point, and then because he didn't have a cure for her at the moment, he got her, he like froze her, and then, or like maybe like her body died, but he preserved her brain, and then now he's made her a new body. And that does go into the robot with the human mind in it and everything like that, with the human brain inside of the robot territory. Kind of goes in the Frankenstein setup as well. I also wanted to point out the Bride of Frankenstein could also apply to this, where it's, like he made her to be his perfect bride. I don't know. I got into a weird concept thing earlier when I was going down this rabbit hole, but I'm just like, I don't care. I'm putting it in the movie or putting it in the video. Where it's just like, okay, well, maybe she had been the woman that he'd been in love with, and maybe she either died or got extremely sick, and he like was able to like preserve her brain, and the way that like Nemu's brain got preserved at one point in time, but like he was able to like preserve her brain, and then wife, daughter, sister, granddaughter, whatever you want to go with, preserve her brain, and then made this new body for her, and then put her brain in the body. And that's where we get like this Frankenstein thing. And now she just like talks like him because like maybe for a long time he was the only person she was around, in that regard, or around in like a meaningful sense of the word. Maybe he hid her away, and now he's just randomly claiming that, oh, she's my daughter, whatever setup. I did want to point out this doesn't happen in the actual Frankenstein movie. This happens in the Young Frankenstein movie with the Mel Brooks movie with Gene Wilder, rest in peace, where they have Frankenstein, who of course he's the monster, where you have the Frankenstein's monster and everything, and they have the moment where like, because they're trying to like balance out the monster's brain, they take like, there's like this, I don't know what exactly happens, it's been a while since I've watched the movie, but they do like not a mind swap, but like, I don't know, like a mind fusion, where like some of Dr. Frankenstein's intelligence gets put into the monster. So maybe this is that type of a case too, where like the monster, who's like the girl in this case, got some of Vegapunk's intelligence put into her as well. So that way Vegapunk could, continue his research even more and have like an assistant that would be like as smart as he was. I just had that thought and I just had to run with it. I just wanted to have that there. And then the last one that I have, which is why there's a TARDIS in the thumbnail and why I have this out here. This is what I get. This is what I have to work with. Stand up. Stay. Oh, by the way, that's a cookie jar. If it had batteries in it, I could push the light on top and it would make noise, but it doesn't have batteries in it, so it can't make noise. But that's a cookie jar that we don't ever actually put cookies in. It just sits on a bookshelf. And then I have another TARDIS back there behind Hedgehog under the Hedgehog. But the last one that I wanted to point out, that I just kind of had the thought of at some point, was, what if Vegapunk is a Time Lord? What if Vegapunk is a Time Lord, like the Doctor from Doctor Who? Because, what if it is like Vegapunk like landed on like the One Piece world at some point in time? Not that he's like the actual Doctor. Not that Vegapunk is like, David Tennant. Okay, fine. Maybe Vegapunk is the Doctor. Stop arguing with me. I do like you as the Doctor. It's the Jodie Whittaker pop vinyl, if you weren't sure. You can just sit over here for now. But like the thought that I had was, oh, what if Vegapunk is a Time Lord? And I know that this is not true. I just wanted to run with this. That, like, Vegapunk's a Time Lord. And that, like, yeah, maybe he landed on Karakuri Island a long time ago at some point in time. And maybe he didn't have all the technology he was supposed to have. His TARDIS or his ship or whatever broke. And then now he's been spending however amount of time on Earth, on the One Piece world. First it started off on Karakuri Island, then at some point he met Judge and Queen. Maybe this is not a Time Lord that's as, morally nice as the Doctor is, although there are times where the Doctor has done horrible things. But where, where the Doctor, where like the Time Lord at the time has just like, Vegapunk just like, uses his intelligence that he has because he's from an alien planet, and he uses his intelligence. We know that aliens exist in One Piece because thank you, Inaru cover story. So maybe that's the case, that Vegapunk's an alien and either ages very slowly, or like what we've seen happen with both the Doctor and the Master and other Time Lords, they of course regenerate. Or every so often, Vegapunk will regenerate, like if Vegapunk gets, dies or something like that, regenerates, looks different, still has Vegapunk's mind. And then because Vegapunk still has the same mind, they just keep him on. He's still that intelligent. I do like the concept of it being that maybe it was the previous form. Like maybe they pulled the Capaldi into Jodie Whittaker, where like maybe Vegapunk was like the old man, like the grizzled old, scientist type of thing, like the Albert Einstein type scientist. Nothing against Albert Einstein, but like that type of a scientist. And, just very old and like kind of crazy and everything. And then like they regenerated, they died and they regenerated, which again can go into like the putting their brain into like a new body and then like going that way or something like that, if that's what they want to go with. But, then regenerated and then turned into, a female this time. Because that's what Vegapunk's like, I'm tired of being a man. I want to be a woman. And then still just like keeps the old, the old man speech pattern. Maybe that's the case. That's like why they keep still talking like an old man. I don't know. I had the Time Lord thought, and I'm just like, Time Lord regeneration kind of works in this regard. Maybe Vegapunk has new identities every now and then like eventually just ended up with this identity. I'm gonna say this now. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, well, what if Vegapunk had like the immortal surgery on them and was able to live an extremely long amount of time? Could be possible. But, if I can go with the Time Lord theory, the Time Lord regeneration theory, what if it was that Vegapunk had like landed on the One Piece world at some point in time, either maybe during the Void Century or sometime shortly after the Void Century, and maybe had initially fallen for like the government propaganda of, the world government, like, these guys were the good guys, the ancient kingdom was the bad guys, however way you want to put it. Maybe he fell for it. Maybe this is a Time Lord, as I said, that's not nearly as compassionate as the Doctor tends to be. Not as bad as the Master, but not as compassionate as the Doctor. And like eventually just ended up like, okay, that's fine. And then at some point maybe they ended up, I don't know, because Time Lords can have their memories erased. Maybe something happened with that. Maybe they found him and convinced him to work for them. And then like at some point like he regenerated and left. And then like after maybe some point in time, Vegapunk realized that it was getting close to the time where things are going to start changing around here. Maybe seeing the way that, what happened with Roger was something that affected that. And, maybe then Vegapunk went and started working for the world government that way. And, still kind of falls in the line with maybe Vegapunk has the switch inside of the Seraphim and all the pacifistas that when flipped will turn them against the world government and have them help Luffy and his crew or something like that. But I had the Time Lord theory and I had to talk about it, and I had the Frankenstein theory and I had to talk about that. So those are my thoughts. I don't know how much any of them are going to be real. We'll find out in a couple of weeks in the next chapter. I know other people probably had very similar ideas in some of these cases. I don't know, maybe I hit at least one that was a more interesting idea or a more unique idea in there. But, you know, maybe there's some more stuff that'll go on there and we'll get some more information about that. And then maybe I'll do a follow-up video in that regard. So that's what I have for this. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye. The person developing the project is the government's genius scholar, Dr. Vegapunk. He's the most brilliant man in the world. It is said that his scientific ability is 500 years ahead of our time.